The Solar Podcast is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today, impact investing with renewable energy projects. My guest today is Mike Silvestrini, the co-founder and managing partner of Energia, a renewable energy investment platform. Welcome to the Solar Podcast, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Really excited to learn more about your work at Energia and your background. Why don't you give our listeners a little personal history? How did you get interested in ecology and renewable energy?
Sure. Yeah. So really started off in 2007 timeframe. I was in grad school. I had just returned from the Peace Corps. I was in Boston University at the time and was really focused on international studies and diplomacy. And the things that were rocking the world at that time were basically conflicts over fossil fuels and the price of a gallon of gasoline at the pump. And I had a conversation with my girlfriend's brother at the time, now my brother-in-law, and he introduced me to this concept of solar energy. It really hadn't gotten out to the East Coast where we were living at the time, and kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there's a technology out there that's commercially viable, questionably at the time, I'll say, but commercially viable and being installed around California. And there's not a lot of folks starting up businesses to install solar energy on the East Coast, and we should give it a try. And I just looked at the alignment of what was happening around the world at the time, and man, it made a lot of sense that solar energy was going to grow exponentially. As also the year, I believe, that the UN climate panel won the Nobel Prize for their research into climate change. So it was a hot topic. And we needed to do anything we could figure out to avoid continuing these oil-based conflicts. So that's why we started Green Skies, my first company, back in 2007, and that got me into the industry. And it's just been a real fun ride ever since. It's a roller coaster. You know, we call it the solar coaster for good reason, but it's been the joy of my professional life to be part of it.
So you were definitely an early adopter in 2007. And how did Green Skies differ than Energia?
Well, Green Skies was a devco. We were a quintessential developer. We dabbled with different varieties of in-house EPC capabilities. So there were times when we had full construction apparatus in-house, but normally our fighting weight was around 100, 120 people, where we could subcontract the actual installation work and focus on the financial aspects and the development aspects and the project management aspects of the company. And it grew pretty well in those days. And nowadays, we've learned a lot through my experiences at Green Skies about how to raise larger sums of capital to deploy into distributed generation solar projects. And we're taking those skills and we're applying them to create a new platform where investors can engage us and engage these solar energy projects and directly participate in investing in solar for the first time. So really two very different businesses, but it certainly helps to understand from the perspective of a developer what goes into making these projects tick when we're now on the investment side, searching for premium investments to bring our investors capital into.
And I assume that your experience in the Peace Corps informed your decision to pursue international work. Where did you go to the Peace Corps, and tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I was in Mali in West Africa, and ironically, I was on a conference call with some other solar guys the other day, and one of my counterparts was actually a Peace Corps volunteer in Mali. So Peace Corps is definitely a small world where when we run into each other as returned Peace Corps volunteers, there's always a special spark amongst people who've endured that whole Peace Corps experience. But I was a small business advisor. I lived in a city called Segu, which is the second largest city in Mali after Bamako, the capital, and started to recognize that just coming from a Western climate, we actually know a little bit about business. It's built into our DNA in a way that African rural culture doesn't necessarily understand what we would consider to be basic fundamentals of business. So even though I had no business experience of my own at the time, I was still in a position where I could actually advise certain rural African market participants on how they might better engage the market and sell more product and market and things of that nature. It's kind of second nature to somebody who grows up in the modern United States. After leaving that, I kind of realized that I think business is something I should try. My father was a newspaper writer, my mother was a nurse, and starting a business wasn't really something that was talked a lot about at the house. And I didn't, quite frankly, realize it was something that anybody could do until I met the father of my now wife, and his name is Art Linares, and he made it clear to me, like, this is the land of opportunity, and you can create a business, and anybody can create any business that they want. And we took advantage of that freedom when we started Green Skies, and now many years later, I couldn't imagine my life without commercial enterprise at the center of it.
Yeah, I too, my roots are as a forest ecologist. Both my parents had their feet firmly planted in the nonprofit or higher education
Hmm.
arenas. And when I finally got into business years after graduate school, it was a homecoming for me. And I love being part of the free market and what I call growth for the greater good. We are now at the precipice of the energy transition. We're we're right about here, right? And we're about to go vertical, and it's a rocket ship, and it's just wonderful to be at that confluence in history where technology has aligned with our awareness that we've been living beyond our means ecologically as a species, and that has now very serious consequences for us, for our health, our economics, and really the future of humanity.
Yeah.
So, what was, tell us more though about the ideation of
Yeah.
Energia, and what is Energia? What are you guys up to?
Yeah. So in 2017, I sold my partners and I sold Green Skies, and the day after, my family and I hopped on a plane and we started traveling extensively for a number of months. And at each destination, I would, of course, poke around at what the solar industry looked like in places like Vietnam and Italy and Latin America and Africa, and just met with a lot of different solar companies from different places and tried to listen to what their experiences were. And I kept on coming across a really similar situation where you had some talented developers with deep relationships who were able to put together sophisticated solar energy projects wherever they were in the world. And they had a hard time accessing capital for those. Uh, Project finance, as it's known in the United States, really is still very much maturing in many markets globally, and especially on the cost of capital. They cannot achieve what we can easily achieve here in the United States in terms of that fluid access to dollars to build projects, despite the fact that they had a lot of good projects. And at the same time, having sold the company, I started to, for the first time in my life, to view the world as an investor and through the lens of an investor. And how does one manage their wealth or their retirement plan in order to have a financial success throughout their lives? And those two things came together in that I started asking myself, well, geez, nobody wants to own this or finance this fantastic project that these guys have put together. Um, and I think that would work really nicely in my investment portfolio. And then I got to thinking, there's probably a lot of other people who would really benefit from a double digit consistent contracted yield from a technology like solar, where there's few moving parts, and it's kind of like clipping coupons once you get the thing installed. And where bonds were at the time, which is basically below inflation, it felt like access to solar energy project investing would really benefit many retail portfolios as people start to take advantage of the Internet of Things coming into investing. You have things like Coinbase and Robinhood, and People are taking self-directed IRAs, which is when you take your retirement plan and instead of, you know, having a manager just pump it into mutual funds, you actually take control of those dollars and invest it as you see fit. That could be real estate. You can buy gold. So there's a lot of changes happening in the way we invest. Even the sort of collapse of the pension structure as it transitions more towards a 401k structure is another example of the tectonic shift in the way people are investing. And it just felt to me that solar energy really wasn't anywhere on the map. We have yield cos, which somehow only throw off 4 or 5% annual dividends, which I know is below the types of returns we're getting from most of this asset class. We could invest in solar companies, but that's a whole different type of whole different can of worms. When we're investing in something like Sunrun, we're investing in the management team itself and its operating expenses. We're not investing in projects per se. So there really wasn't a great investment product on the market in our opinion, that connected investors directly to that long-term yield of the projects. So we got to thinking, and then the first thing we did was a Regulation D offering. So that's sort of like a friends and family offering. We called some buddies, we got some capital together, and we built a hydro project down in Brazil. And again, it was primarily a method for myself and my small group here to manage our own capital. And it worked pretty well, and we
And what
built the
year was
project.
that?
This is let's see here, about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And so we built the project and it started producing dividends. And those dividends went right back to those investors who participated in that deal. And we had sort of a mousetrap. And that project was in Brazil. So we had proven that we can sort of bundle up some dollars from a broad group of individuals, and then take that package of capital and go and invest in a project anywhere in the world, convert it into operational dividends, and then return those dividends back to the owners of the project. And so we really liked that experience, and our investors did too. And we decided, how do we expand on this? And Regulation A is really it's a much more detailed process with the SEC, but that allows us to share these investments not only with accredited investors but any investor. And this is relatively new policy. And so we started putting the pieces together. We have this great asset class in renewable energy. We have a changing climate amongst the investor community and them taking more control over their investment decisions. And we have this regulation that allows us to connect all the dots together so that individuals can now participate directly in solar energy investing in a way that was impossible until Energia, to our knowledge.
So it seems to me like there are parallels between the type of investors you're drawing to crowdfunding. Is there a direct parallel?
I mean, these when we talk about crowdfunding, we use that term lightly at Energia because our job is to identify premium renewable energy assets and to apply all of our experience as developers, as contractors, as financiers, as investors ourselves, take all that experience and make sure that those projects are gonna deliver the returns that we're looking for. Now, we do that, provide that service on behalf of a number of different types of investors. We have institutional investors, which are large, everything from large investment banks to publicly listed funds, whose money we manage. We also have businesses who want to invest in our assets in order to offset their carbon footprint or to enjoy that consistent cash flow. All the way down to retail investors and even non-accredited retail investors. So we have investors that range from $100 up to $100 million, and we manage their capital in this asset class the same way.
It sounds like you're bringing power to the people in the developing world, right? Developing renewable energy projects or owning those projects at least, which is catalyzing that development. And then you're bringing power to investors of various flavors here in the United States and internationally. You had a recent story that uh, Victory Hill is investing $63 million in a fund to fuel 75 megawatts of solar projects in Brazil.
Hmm.
Why Brazil? What is so special about what's going on in Brazil?
Brazil is special because it has that momentary alignment of features that solar guys like me get all excited about when the policy is in place, when competition has yet to really erode the yield, when there's a large number of quality customers seeking the product. So it's just got this perfect storm going on. And we've seen that time and again in the industry, right? I mean, you live in Illinois. There was a moment where the SREC program had come out in that state, and it was a really big, exciting market. But that's it's kind of like whack-a-mole. Before that, it may have been New Jersey's SREC program, or Ontario's feed-in tariff, or Japan's feed-in tariff. So there's always these kind of moments where a market becomes a really exciting place to invest. And in our opinion, the moment right now is Brazil. It is really what Ontario, Canada was to this industry 10 years ago, is what Brazil is to this industry today. And it may be the last, untouched market where you have such an enormous energy use, such a huge bench of premium customers, and they have a nationwide community solar policy. So it's really amongst the best policies we've seen too. And it's a huge market. So this may be the last, Brazil-sized opportunity to sort of awaken that we'll get to experience as an industry, because solar has really made its way around the world. But we would be remiss to not really take that opportunity seriously. And there are other exciting pockets where we find blue sky opportunities throughout the world. But I can't put anything alongside Brazil right now, in my opinion, of what's going on around the world in the industry.
And how long a run do you think Brazil has in this first wave?
I think we have 3 to 5 more years.
Mhm.
And just like, when you engage a market that you think is going to be hot, you have to get there a couple years before it's hot. You have to really predict that.
Yeah.
If you're just listening to this podcast and discovering that Brazil's red hot right now and you've never been, you're probably going to have a hard time penetrating into that opportunity, because, as you know, you have to learn all the policies. Yeah, there's a lot to learn: the taxes, how to move money back and forth, who are the major players, and who are the EPCs, how do you import equipment. There's a lot of plumbing in order to activate and take advantage of a hot opportunity. And we did that at Energia in order to have a great product to offer our investors right out of the chute.
Cool. It would be a lot easier probably across the board to just sit tight here in the United States, where things are just a little safer and known and predictable. Where else are you venturing? And tell me about that higher purpose that you have in the world.
Yeah, I would challenge that it's easier to do this in the United States, having done it in multiple, built solar projects now on 4 continents. I feel that Brazil is much easier. They have enabling policies that allow us to, buy land, pursue an interconnection with the utility company, which is regulated by the national regulator. That whole interconnection process. I mean, give you an example. We just pursued a number of projects in Virginia, and we put in about 28 unique sites for around, there's probably about 50 or 60 megawatts worth of stuff. And just every single project was shot down by Dominion. The cost for interconnecting a 3 megawatt plant was ranged from $2 to $10 million. And there's no reason for that. That's not a technical justified position. We know that because we install solar all over the place, and it doesn't cost that much to connect a system. So where are they coming up with this? Well, in a place like Virginia, where we don't have a deregulated marketplace, the utility company calls the shots, and that can be a very challenging place. So we look for markets not because they're nearby or it's something that we're grown into or born into. We look at markets for the characteristics of that market. For example, you probably wouldn't imagine that you can have a premium transaction in Africa, but you very well can. There are some excellent customers in Africa. They have big multi-billion-dollar off takers with staying power, like the telecoms and 100-year-old schools and universities and things of that nature. So there are great customers there, and there are positions that you can take in Africa that will, I believe, challenge anything you can find here in the United States. That said, we look at investing in solar as sort of, we're pouring a cocktail. We're making this cocktail, and it has a few different things in there. We have this punctuation of yield that we get from emerging markets, and the ice of that cocktail is the United States. It's the ballast to this exciting emerging market stuff. So we feel that to properly diversify in this asset class, you would be right to have a little bit of flavor from all of the above. And that's going to give you the most consistent, highest yield.
Very cool. Yeah, we certainly don't have it all figured out, and there are many challenges, even in
Mhm.
deregulated states. Here in Illinois,
Yeah.
interconnection fees were quite high for the community solar developers, and that, I think, is still a point of contention. And,
hmm
in
hmm
general, it's a little ironic, I think, that we have created utilities that are there for a public good, but are also regulated monopolies, and so they do have a tremendous amount of power.
hmm
And with power comes corruption. And we have seen in the United States many significant stories of utilities basically trying to break the rules to their own benefit. And
Sure.
that's just kind of what humans do sometimes, right? When we get too much power, we abuse it. A small set of us will abuse that power. So I don't know that there's any that there's any answer to that other
There
than,
is, in my opinion. I
yeah,
mean, you
what's
have to
that?
get it structured. You have to get it structured correctly. This reminds me, go back a few years. Community solar was sort of invented, if you will, in Colorado. And there was a group of companies trying to bring community solar to other markets. And they came eventually to Connecticut, which is where I'm from, and a place where I'm very familiar with the way the utility companies and the legislature view renewable energy, and what their limitations and challenges are. And unfortunately, the solar energy industry took the tact that in order to get solar, community solar, there should be basically paid for by the utility company, in that we're going to use your transmission and distribution lines to deliver our electricity to our remote customers, but we're not going to pay you for it. I thought that was just a total wrong approach, because when solar companies overreach in a pursuit of incentives, and some companies are inclined to do that because they may be lousy at installing efficiently, or they're having a hard time getting the right business model in place. So a solution for that is to over pursue incentives in some cases, and that always backfires on the industry whenever we do that. And because what it does is it creates a defensive posture at the utility company. We have to put up our walls to defend what's ours, and to make sure that we're not tread upon. The right way to do community solar is to open very much and allow for the development of solar energy projects from folks like us, so we can get out there and do our job of dropping new solar plants onto the grid. But we should pay our fair way of getting our electricity from the plant to our customer, and the utility company shouldn't be able to stop us. Instead, we have a system where this solar energy overreached, utility company combated it, and now they're like this, and no projects are efficiently getting done. And well, many projects are getting done, but it's not
Mhm.
without pulling your hair out. And so I think that that's all about alignment of interests. The utility companies and its corruption, and their when they take and dramatically boost certain rates within your electric bill that particularly harm solar. They're doing that as a reaction to protect their interests, and they don't need to if we were properly structuring this stuff. I mean, that's my opinion. I'm sure many of your listeners will disagree with me, but that's that's the way I look
Well,
at it.
and you see the fight going on for net metering in California right now, which is a
hmm
good example of this. And it's so short-sighted because
mm
we're
hmm
going to triple the grid when we electrify transportation and HVAC. we're going to triple the grid. And so there's plenty of business for everybody, whether you're a renewable energy company or a utility. And eventually, all of the utilities are going to get in the game of wind, solar, and storage because of the pure economics of that. Right? They make good business sense. That's why Excel and Alliant and NIPSCO and the list goes on now of these large IOUs that are just making the transition spontaneously. Um, so I let's talk more though about international community solar and juxtaposing that with the US. The US, as you said, is whack-a-mole. It sounds like maybe the international markets are a bit of that as well.
Hmm.
Um, what
For
is
sure.
what is the future of what is the when you look into your crystal ball, where are you excited about to the extent that you can talk about that? Um, I don't want you to divulge your trade secrets. You
No,
have a
sure.
business to run here and an ROI to bring to your investors, but what's going on the international scene that we Americans can often lose sight of, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken away a couple lessons over the last 4 or 5 years of exploring international opportunities. One of them is that if you look at like in Europe, they have large DFIs or development financial institutions, and sometimes there's artificially low cost of capital. And I don't feel that that really benefits any market. So sometimes you'll see, for example, these DFIs offering 2% debt or 1% debt on a solar project. Sounds very nice. It's a nice thing to do, right? Super cheap debt. Forget about the fact that somebody else is paying for that cost. But the idea here is that it's going to pollute the market, because what about a group of investors like us who want to commercially engage that market and power capital into that market to see it grow? Well, it's really hard for us to engage a market where there's artificially low cost of capital in there. We see that in Africa a lot. If you go to Kenya right now, um, and you bring what's a reasonable risk adjusted return for a solar energy project in Kenya? In my mind, it's got to be sort of mid teens. Because again, we're getting upper single digits, low double digits here in the United States. If I'm going to be able to get Walmart at a 9, I'm not going to take 11 and go to Kenya. It's just not paying me enough to take that additional risk. So I think we have to be an order of magnitude higher than that. So I would say a fair risk adjusted yield. In order to see capital come gushing into Kenya, it needs to be priced correctly. And you can't really find easily 14 and 15% yields in Kenya, because most of the developers are under this belief that there's going to be all this super low cost capital coming in from Europe, and they don't want my money because they're going to get this super cheap money. And of course, the money coming in from Europe is super bureaucratic. It's slow, it's sluggish, and it causes everybody to price their deals with their customers under the assumption that they're going to get 2% debt. So they don't even have the option of taking actual dollars, just because they've built in this specter of cheaper dollars into their systems. So you have to be careful about how each market currently operates. Is it operating on a rigid financial set of metrics, or is it operating under the guise of short-term incentives that may not create sustainable growth? That's why we love Brazil. It is au natural. You invest in a project, the project costs X, you sell that energy, you collect that revenue, the revenue creates a great return on investment. There's no relationship between that project and the sovereign of Brazil. It's another shining feature. But I think that we're going to see an exportation of community solar worldwide. That is the way this works best, is that we decouple the location of the solar with where it's finally and ultimately used,
Hmm.
and we allow to develop things in a slightly larger scale, but not so large that it disrupts the efficiency of the grid operations. So I really believe that community solar is the future of this industry on a long-term basis. There will always be distributed generation and rooftop and behind the meter type stuff, but I think for grid management purposes, and we're going to need a lot of community solar. So we're keyed in on markets that have the sophistication and the political will to put that together.
Are there other examples in the developing world of markets that are emerging?
Yeah, sure. We're big fans of sub-Saharan Africa for a number of reasons. And you would think that's kind of odd considering how obsessed we are with making our returns as we manage other people's money. But the reason why we're so comfortable with that is A, familiarity with the continent. Been there many, many times, know all the developers, know the customers, know the utility companies, and that's a lot of familiarity that comes into play there. But looking at it, what we really like about it is we don't need any incentives. We don't need any politicizing. We don't care what the utilities opinions are because we're going to install the solar and we're going to bring batteries with us and we're going to get the job done to save our customer money and provide more electricity onto this grid. And there's really nothing anybody can do to stop us unless they, you know, ban the use of generators on site, which every single person in Africa has. That's really an unthinkable outcome. So it's really, I love the fact that we can go and get our work done in Africa. It is completely a closed loop financial architecture to the projects. And the yields are in many markets where they should be to price in that risk.
Hmm. So let's talk a little bit about if I'm an investor, I'm a retail investor looking for a good place to make a difference in the clean energy transition. What do I need to be thinking about?
I mean, you're basically it's a new asset class in many ways to most individuals. So they get a little bit of mystery shock from even thinking about investing in a power project. But the reality is it's very similar to real estate. So you should think about investing in renewables similar to the thinking about investing in real estate. We're going to buy an asset, we're going to build the thing, and then we're going to rent it to somebody for a long-term basis. And that rent revenue is what creates our return on investment. And we want that rent revenue to be long, we want it to be chunky, and we want it to be backed up by quality credit. And those are the primary hallmarks of what describes a great deal versus a lousy deal. You can go, the next step down the rabbit hole would be, all right, well, what technology are we using? And, what are the political risks and regulatory risks associated with the project? What are the tax risks associated with the project? And kind of start to understand your bevy of risk tolerance. And you can keep going as deeply as you want. And, I've been doing this for 14, 15 years, and I'm still going, still finding new ways to, explore the risk assessment and, what makes what is in the DNA of a solar project is you can get as nerdy as you want to, all the way down to the way cells are manufactured and whether or not they're coming from locations that might have child labor in China and being sure to steer away with that. So you can always find something new to perfect your version of solar energy. But as a new investor, you're going to want to work with somebody who knows what they're doing, and you're going to want to look at the fundamentals of the asset, namely who's buying the power, who's building the project, and how do I make sure I get paid.
Hmm. And you're suggesting that not only are the returns potentially higher in the developing world, but they're equally as safe as they are investing in developed countries?
I mean, I think that they're risk adjusted. So I think that once you look at the return delta, yes, they are equally safe. Because if you look at, for example, our projects in Brazil that start off an unlevered 20% return on investment, which is phenomenal, but you're taking some foreign exchange exposure there. So, is that comparable to a 7 in the United States or an 8 in the United States? Well, it sure is, because if you stress test the foreign exchange scenarios to any reasonable level of standard deviation, you're going to realize that this thing is, the returns are so durable that we would really need a catastrophe for that return to be even close to 7. So therefore, we could make the argument that this 20 in Brazil is a little bit better of a deal than this 7 in the United States, because both are subject to force majeure and major travesty. But assuming a normal sensitivity test, the stresses that are likely for the Brazil project will still leave us in a better position than a 7. So that's the risk adjusted analysis that we perform all day at Energia and try to bring those yields to our customers.
Very cool. Well, what
Thanks.
else is on your mind, and what else would you like our listeners to know?
What we're looking to do here is build a marketplace where, on one end, new investor participants can come to a place where they know there's a track record of financial performance, where projects have been thoughtfully assembled to de-risk this asset class. I'm an investor in solar, so we're trying to build that for the investors. And on the other side, we're seeking our old and new relationships with project developers who have either a project that is a bad fit for institutional capital, or simply because they think this is a cooler, a more holistic way of looking at project finance, and they want to engage that marketplace and bring that project to us. And then together, we sit back, we take a fee for administrating that. That's how we get paid, is basically a management fee in order to underwrite the project on one side and find the investor on the other, and make that match. But ultimately, it's a good thing for the project and for both sides of the equation. So if you have projects and you're listening to this thing and you're not sure how to finance them, we'll certainly take a look. If you're an investor and you're looking to engage this asset class in a new way, you should take a look at us.
Are you different than a traditional community solar developer, say a Soltage or a Nexamp?
Yeah, we're really nothing like that. I would describe those guys as developers. So they're in the business of originating deal flow or acquiring deal flow for their balance sheet. They're going to hold on to as much of that project equity as they can. We're not, we don't do that. What we're trying to do is connect investors to the project. So think of us more of an investor, and we would call Sotage and say, hey, do you guys have any use for the X amount of capital? Can we put that to work in some of your projects? So we might partner up with a developer like that and provide them capital, but we don't develop projects ourselves. We're really on the financial underwriting side of the puzzle.
And you're not a long-term asset owner?
Our investors are the long-term asset owners. We're the
Mhm,
long-term asset manager.
mhm,
So we hold on to them for a long time. We do sell projects opportunistically in order to
mhm.
create, again, if it's in the best interest of the return of our investors, we will do that as manager. That's our discretion. But our position is, the way you create wealth in this world is you own real assets that produce chunky dividends, and then you plow those dividends back in order to compound that yield. That's pretty much the only way to do it. There are other
Yeah.
ways, of course. You can get lucky and you can create something great and you can sell something, but really, a long, consistent dividend yields that you compound is our recommendation.
And so is there an analogy between like an E-Trade and Energia? Are you analogous to an E-Trade?
Yeah, in that we are a marketplace. E-Trade is a place where you go to find your public securities, and you shop, and they have all sorts of products and various assortments of these public securities. And Energy is a place where you go to shop for solar energy securities and to buy into portfolios of renewable energy assets. So it's similar in that we're marketplaces.
Yeah. So when we're going to wrap up here in a couple of minutes, but when people go to your website at energia.com, energea.com, and you go to the marketplace,
Hmm.
you see there's a tranche of open investments. There's some coming soon investments, notably in the United States and Africa. And then there's fully funded. Uh, I assume that it's really the open and coming in that potential investors would want to drill down on.
Hmm.
And how is that pipeline? I mean, we're going to double the industry, Mike, in the next 5 years in the United States, right?
Hmm.
Um, from 20 to 40 gigawatts. So the industry is completely on fire. Is this marketplace going to keep pace with that or exceed that pace, do you think?
I mean, our goal is to provide a great investment product to our investors. And if we do that through, three fantastic assets that hit their return, then we've done our job. If that if doing that job results in more projects coming in and more investors coming in, so that we can grow at the pace of the asset class itself, fantastic. But it's not a prerequisite of our success. Our success is really based off of servicing the customers that we have and making sure that they're connected to premium renewable energy assets. So we're doing that. We're excited to launch this U.S. product, and we like to think big, and we are hopeful that one day millions of people will include renewable energy in their portfolio of investments, and we hope that our particular product is a way that enables more people to participate. So it's not impossible that many people come to Energia to invest in renewable, and use the app and follow their investments through that thing. But what matters most is delivering for our customers.
So I've got your website on screen. I'm at the marketplace, so people
Hmm.
can see for themselves. With the open investments, you see community solar in Brazil, you see assorted solar in the United States. Then you click through, and then you actually see, oh, there's a project in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Yep.
Uh,
Well, it's a New Canaan, Connecticut school system, AAA rated credit. And again, so this is going to give some people a taste of participation in a AAA rated project. But if you were to go back and you check out the Brazil portfolio, there's more to this one, because this one has been launched for a little bit here. And here you go. There's a lot of videos. We try to bring the projects home to the investors so they can understand where these things are and how they work. There's a link there that will take you to a market description about Brazil, what's going on in Brazil, why do we think this is a great market to invest in. You can read and do your research on the market itself, as you can see there. And then if you go back a little bit, I see here's the Brazilian US dollar conversion rates. It's just a great time to bring dollars into Brazil, in our opinion.
hmm.
Um, and if you can
What does
actually
that mean,
scroll
frozen
down.
in ice? What is that referring to?
Frozen in ice is basically that Brazil had been for many years uh, misled politically, and it went from basically a dictatorship into a socialist society back to back. It had hyperinflation, it had mismanagement, it had a series of problems that prevented it from engaging in the modern world, and that's starting to thaw. And say what you will about the ultra sort of right kind of wingnut that's running Brazil right now. There are some benefits of this mentality that he is really trying to put businesses first, and I know that that's to a crazy level, but
Yeah.
it's a good place for business, and you can see for example, just look at the last 5 years of their public stock markets. It's gone from $1 trillion to $5 trillion. It's a real birth of private sector in that country, and it's huge.
And how do I know that I'm not funding deforestation of the Amazon?
Well, you can look at each project. So if you were to, each project has a memo where we describe where the project is, and we're environmentalists. We care deeply about the impact our projects have on the environment. Especially, the first time I ever did a hydro project was down in Brazil, and had to learn a lot about migratory fish patterns and what these things eat and where they need to go in order to maintain their status in the ecosystem. So our projects we're trying to find overused agricultural land or desert and convert those into clean power generation, and to leave the critical ecological value of Brazil intact. My co-founder and I are both board members of an anti-poaching group based in Kenya called Big Life Foundation, and you should check that out. It's a great organization where we protect a few million acres of habitat from incumbent poaching. We've brought in 400 poached elephants a year down to zero in our area of operation, and we have really rebounded an entire ecosystem through that organization. So we don't mess around when it comes to environment.
So if I become an investor in a project, I love it that you can dial into the project level. It's not just a portfolio. And how much detail would an investor get on a project in terms of, you know, w- uh, when is it energized, what maybe the technology is, and those
Everything.
kinds of things?
Yeah, everything's right there. So you can go to the bottom. There's the documentation that we provide to the SEC is akin to an S1. So it's a complete detail on the investment thesis for that market. And then below that, you have each project has a memo where we describe who the customer is, where it's located, what the economics are, when it's going to be constructed, who's constructing it, what equipment we're using, everything that would be relevant to that particular project. That may not be useful to all of our investors because it is detailed, but we provide it so that those who want to do their homework can do so at their leisure on the website. And it's sort of on the bottom of the page there. You see the memos. It's an 8 or 9 page document about a particular project, and there are we're introducing a new project to that portfolio next week, and we just sold a couple projects to that portfolio. So yeah, it's been really fun starting to dial in how do we get this yield out to these customers and in a new way, and it's really exciting to see it working.
There's a lot more Brazilian projects coming, right? Because of that announcement that you made of 75 megawatts, right? There's going to be
Well,
more coming.
those projects are going to be owned by a London listed fund. We have another portfolio of
Mm.
Brazilian projects that are owned by Latin America's largest investment bank, and we have a so basically they're it's I think a testimony to the sophistication of this market that the world's smartest investors are also buying into Energia's projects,
Mhm.
and we're offering that same exact product to you and anyone else who's over the age of 18, who has an American citizenry, who wants to invest in this stuff. So it's that same product that my first 450 or so solar projects that I developed are all owned by Goldman Sachs, and that's fine. But I would love to be able to share that value that we're creating with more individuals who are planning for their own financial future. And this is the way I've made every dollar I've ever earned has been through solar energy. It's pretty good stuff, and to be able to share that with people, not just big banks but individuals, is really why we created Energia.
Awesome. Well, Mike, how can people find you and connect with you?
Mike at energia.com is always available. And, if you know me and you're in the industry, you probably are 1 or 2 degrees of separation to begin with. But, I'm always available. We try to really be transparent, and we're always looking to build new relationships in the space.
Well, thank you. And you've inspired me to dip my toe in the water. So I am going to become an investor
Throw a
and
couple bucks in and see how it
and
feels.
ride the international solar coaster.
Mhm. Fantastic, man. Great to have you on board.
A little bit of housekeeping. You can find all of our content here at the Solar Podcast at cesnrg.com/podcast. We're bringing you interviews with thought leaders like Jesse Grossman at Soltage and Jan Rippingale at Blue Banyan, reducing the soft cost of solar. So check that out. Please subscribe to the channel on YouTube and give it a thumbs up. Please share it with your friends and reach out to me. I'm at TG Montague on Twitter, and T Montague at cesnrg.com is my email. I'm also very fond of LinkedIn, so connect with me and please tell me what you want to hear and bring me guests because I'm just one guy with an immense curiosity, but I have a limited network. So please introduce me to new ideas and new companies and new thought leaders. I want to thank Mike Silvestrini, the co-founder and managing partner of Energia, for coming on the show today. Let's grow solar and storage. I'm Tim Montague.
Thanks, Tim.